When you become a yoga teacher, you realize that there is so much more to it than teaching classes. And the other day I did a Q&A so that I can answer your questions and hopefully save you from Googling these at 11 p.m. at night. So let's begin. The first question was, how much experience do you think a new yoga teacher would need to host a first retreat? No, I don't actually think it's that important. I think, you could start teaching retreats within your first year or first 2 years of teaching. But the important thing I would say is to collaborate with somebody else who's got more experience from you so that you can learn from their mistakes, learn the processes that they go through and learn from their experience and save yourself a lot of headaches as well. Because it is so difficult when you're trying to go it alone and you're just guessing in the beginning. You can make mistakes, you can go down one direction only to find that it's not the right direction and have to completely reroute a few years later. And that has happened to me with things in my business. So I would say try to learn from others by collaborating. And question number 2 is, how many years of practice do you recommend before starting teaching? I recommend a good baseline is at least 2 years, 2 to 3 years of practice, because these trainings, they're very intense. So you want to know that you've got a committed practice. You want to get clear on your reasons for doing the training. Do you want to teach, or are you just looking to deepen your understanding? Also, it's worth noting that these trainings are physically challenging. So you want to have that committed practice to know that you're going to be able to withstand a few hours of yoga every day. Question number 3, any management tips on how to schedule recording days, editing, and posting? So one thing that I do is I split it into different chunks. So I'll have my ideation chunk where I'm just coming up with ideas and I'm script writing. I will have a chunk where I edit. Normally this is a full day that I will block off where I'm not going to be disturbed and I can just focus on the task at hand. And then I will either have like an editing afternoon or multiple editing afternoons, depending on the volume of content that I'm putting out. And then as soon as those videos have been exported, I will upload them to be scheduled so that that's all automated. And I'm always trying to work at least a week to 2 weeks ahead of time, sometimes even a month ahead of time, just so that I don't end up in that stressful situation where I don't have videos for YouTube or, I feel like my social media has been neglected. So if you can, try to work in that way, and I promise you'll save yourself a lot of headaches. How to look for yoga teacher jobs as a newly certified teacher. Now, I did a video on this the other week, which goes into more detail, so I will link that in the description. But the simplest way to get your foot into the door is to reach out to studios, gyms, physiotherapists, spas, wellness centers, any place that you think a yoga class might be appropriate, and just say, hey, I'm a newly qualified teacher. I'm looking to get experience. Do you have any classes that you'd like to put on? Or do you need cover for existing classes? And I promise you that is such an easy way to get known in your community, to offer your services, and to start building rapport with studios that you might want to teach at. Your favorite yoga teacher training, where did you learn from? So my first teacher training was at the Frog Lotus Yoga Teacher Training School in Andalusia, Spain. And I actually found it through a vlog that was shared on YouTube. When I watched it, they shared the whole experience. It looked really comprehensive and just like a really safe space to learn. I was quite young at the time as well. I was 22, and it was the first time I had traveled on my own. It was the first time I'd done anything like this, like really put myself out there. So I wanted to go somewhere where I felt really safe. And that is why that was my favorite teacher training, because it was the start of everything for me, not just teaching yoga, but putting myself out there in a way that I never had done before. So whenever I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious or a little bit nervous, I always put myself back in time, remember that moment and how great I felt by the end of it, and just remind myself that I will feel great if I put myself in those situations where I might feel initially uncomfortable, but I'll probably feel amazing by the end. Advice for sequencing shorter classes. So for me, it doesn't matter what amount of time the class is, but I want there to be a really clear warm up, core flow, and warm down. That doesn't matter if it's a 10-minute class or if it's a 60-minute class. So I teach the same class structure, but the amounts of time are just condensed. So for example, if I'm teaching a 60-minute class, there is a 50-minute warm up, thereabouts, a 30-minute core flow, and a 50-minute warm down. So then I would take that structure, but I would just reformat it for a 20-minute, 30-minute, and so on class. So for example, if it's a 20-minute class, I would do a 5-minute warm-up, a 10-minute core flow and a 5-minute warm down. And in that way, the class still feels well rounded. People still feel like they've gone through that full journey without it feeling rushed. So I hope that tip helps. How do you deal with imposter syndrome? This is something that I still get, and I'd like to start this answer by saying it does not matter what level you are at, how many years of experience you have, you still feel it. But one thing that does help is just continuing to educate yourself so that when you do get asked those hard to answer questions, you feel like you've got enough understanding and enough authority to be able to answer confidently. You feel like you're actually coming from a place of experience, but you'll only ever feel like you're coming from that place if you go out and get that experience. You'll get it from more classes that you teach, from the more books that you read, from the more that you educate yourself and then use what you learn and put it into practice. Next question is, please share info about equipment for filming at home. So depending on your budget, how big you want the production to go, the simplest way for filming at home, I think, is just to have a tripod, a camera, and a wearable mic. A few that I recommend are the Manfrotto tripods. They're a really great brand. They're really robust. I've always been a fan of Canon. I always say that Canons are like the iPhones of cameras. So if you're an iPhone person, I think you'll like Canon. But a lot of people, they also like Sony too. So it's just a personal preference. And then a wearable mic, something that you can clip onto the collar of your t-shirt, or even clip a headset mic into so that you can get that mic closer to your mouth. Just those 3 simple things that you could start off with would produce really high quality content. Then if you wanted to go even more high quality, you could bring in lights, but I've rarely used lights because I find, it's a lot of setup, and if I can get great natural light, then that's good for me. You can always enhance the colors in the edit. So sometimes it's worth just saving yourself purchasing an expensive light if you can just get the most out of the light that you have readily available. I love this question. Can we start yoga at 32 and still aim to teach yoga? Yes. So many people think that they're too old or they've missed the boat, they're not flexible enough. They should have started in their teens or early 20s, but that's not the case. Especially not when it comes to teaching either. When I did my first teacher training, I was the baby of the group, right? I was 22, and a lot of the ladies, they were in their mid 40s, 50s, some were also younger too, but I definitely felt like I lacked life experience, and they had so much more wisdom that they could bring to their classes that I was quite envious of. I really wanted that. I wanted to be able to put myself in their shoes and speak from their point of view, but I couldn't. And that's why I think if you're older and you do have that life experience, bring that to your classes. That can be your most valuable tool to be able to draw inspiration from. How to manage creating a fresh sequence consistently. So for this, I think it's where do you get your inspiration from? Not just your personal practice, but go to other people's classes, do online classes. There are so many resources out there that you can use to get inspiration from. Watch little practice clips that people are sharing on social media and go and try out that transition, go and try out that combination of poses and go, ooh, I like that, but maybe I could do it in my own way. And that's what I've been doing for years. And that's how I have I think 1,000 classes now on my main YouTube channel, from just taking little bits from what I see, going to classes, filling my cup up of inspiration, and then drawing from there. Now, another question was, any tips for cueing? Yes, I always like to err on the side of saying less, but what I do say needs to be really impactful, because I think otherwise it just feels like word vomit, right? And people don't know how to pick out what information is important. Whereas if you just stick to 3 key principles. So for example, for a beginner, they always need to know where are their hands, where are their feet. This is obviously dependent on the pose. If they're only standing on their feet, then that might just be enough. But they always need to know those key placements. Then where are other body parts in alignment with their foundation? Then lastly, is there any other information that you need to give them? Is it a modification? Is it their gaze? Or is it just a reminder to breathe? So I always try to stick to those 3 key things for beginners. If I'm teaching intermediates or advanced, I know that there's certain things that they don't need to be told. Like they don't need to be told how to get into the pose because they're probably familiar with it. But in those cases, I am trying to add more nuance. Like, is there something else that I can draw their attention to that will make them go, that's new to me. That really made a difference in that pose. So that might seem a little bit vague, but hopefully it gives you an idea. Then any tips on what to say for guiding into Shavasana? So this is a personal preference. Some people like to talk the whole way through Shavasana, but I've always preferred silence because I think by the time people have listened to me talk through the entire class, in my mind, they're probably ready for a bit of peace and quiet. So I just guide people into Shavasana, into the physical pose. And then, I just give them complete silence. And I find in many cases, when you're stuck for what to say, silence is often the best thing. Like saying nothing can be so much more powerful than filling the space with noise. This is a really great question. How do you find a YTT that best aligns with you? With my first yoga teacher training, I was really lucky and I just saw a YouTube video and decided to go for that. It was a little bit impulsive. Whereas now when I'm looking for trainings, I research the teacher. I see, who are they? What experience do they have? Where do they stand on certain things that feel important to me? Get to know the person that you're going to be learning from. If it's a group of teachers, then try to understand what is going to be included in the course. Because I've spoken to many teachers and it seems like their trainings either didn't prepare them for sequencing, like they didn't really feel confident to sequence, or maybe it didn't really teach them about safe alignment, or maybe it didn't really go into how to verbalize the actions that we're trying to guide people through. So I would try to look for a training that is really well-rounded and includes all of these things so that you know that you're going to hit all of your bases and feel confident to go and teach when you finish. Okay. So, hi Charlie, I just qualified as a yoga teacher, but I don't want to teach in studios, but I would like to teach through pre-recorded classes. I would appreciate your thoughts on this. So, in my experience, teaching in person is very different to teaching online because 1, you don't have a room full of people where you can get feedback from. You're just teaching to a camera. So then, you have to learn how to get comfortable on camera, which can take years and years. Like I'm now, I think 6 or 7 years into this, and I now feel like I can talk to the camera like a friend, but in the early days, it was so alien to me. So I do find when you teach both in person and online, there's so many skill sets that you have to learn. So I don't think there's any issue with going straight into teaching online, but there's just more things that you might need to get used to, like not having feedback, like having to make certain assumptions because you can't see if your cue has landed. You really have to put yourself in the shoes of the people that you might be teaching and think, what do I need to tell them? What might they be looking for? And all of these things. So in that way, teaching online, you become a little bit of a mind reader, whereas teaching in person, you get that first-hand feedback. This came up and was probably the most asked question. How to memorize the sequences? In the early days, I used to just have my class plan. I would just read through it. And I would find I would probably remember like 50 to 60%. But then what I started doing was I would close my eyes and I would visualize myself going through the class really quickly, double time. And I found doing that visualization really helped me feel like I'd already done the class, so that when I came to teach it, I felt like it was the second time around that I was doing it. And I had that practice already and I felt really confident to guide that class. So hopefully that helps. Give it a go. Then this is the last question. And actually I got quite a few people asking this question. And it was, if you have video recordings from Zoom, would you repost them on YouTube? Personally, no. because I think it's just a question of quality. Like the Zoom quality isn't that high, but also Zoom videos, the way you present them, you kind of do them as if you're teaching an in-person class. Whereas when you teach on YouTube, it's very different. You're presenting to an audience that you don't know. So it's a little bit more formal on YouTube. And that's why I wouldn't just take a video from Zoom and post it onto YouTube, especially because you're probably addressing people in the Zoom meeting, and you're probably, coming up close to the screen. And that might be a little bit weird if you're doing a YouTube class where people just want you to be in frame the whole time. So that would be why I wouldn't go and do that. I hope these answers have been helpful. I think I'm going to make this a regular segment on the channel. So if you have any questions that I haven't answered, please pop them down below and I will save this for the next round of the Q&A. Take care.